Hello everyone, this is Blair, and today I'm going to be going over my Farseer Resto Shaman raid build. I feel like I have enough time raiding as Resto Shaman this season to at least go over sort of the basic rotation, some fundamentals, and maybe some common pain points that some Resto Shamans may have. This video is going to assume that you have a very general understanding of how Resto Shaman works, in particular with tidal waves and using your ancestors, etc. So I'll post a link in the description to my Mythic Plus guide. Obviously there are some major differences between Mythic Plus and Raid, but that should at least go over some of the basics of how Resto Shaman works if you otherwise don't really understand it. On screen is the Whispering Waves build that we play in Raid. The important part is the capstone talent, called Whispering Waves, in which your healing wave healing is duplicated between all of your targets with Riptide. So essentially, the build revolves around throwing out as many Riptides as we can get, and then cleaving everybody with Healing Wave. It's very simple. I would say that this build is pretty strict. There's really not a lot of fluidity in the talents that we'll take. You could maybe get away with playing Spirit Wolf instead of Thunderous Paws for the damage reduction, if you really wanted. Or maybe the Astral Shift damage taken reduction in specific fights. The only one that I think is like truly fluid is playing Earthen Wall Totem versus Ancestral Protection Totem. If your raid seems to have a lot of random deaths, especially in Prog, it may be worth playing Ancestral Protection Totem for the free res. But I tend to play Earthen Wall unless my raid leader like specifically asks for APT in certain situations. Stats are also fairly simple for Resto Shaman in Raid this season. Basically it's haste and crit over everything, in particular haste. And this is because the way our ancestors are spawned with Undulation, we want to be casting as many healing waves as we can without overcapping our Riptides to stack ancestors. And I'll explain kind of the gameplay loop for that and some common misconceptions here. But essentially just know that the more haste you have, even over the 30% cap, kind of the better you're going to be, because you're just going to have more ancestors. And that's where the majority of our healing is going to come from. With this build, we don't usually play this in Mythic Plus, but we are taking Earth Elemental and Primordial Bond. This makes it so Earth Elemental is going to give us not only a 15% max health increase, but also give us a 5% DR, making Earth Ele a pretty nice cooldown on a 5-minute CD, so you're realistically only going to get it once or maybe twice on a fight, like Mythic Dimensius or something. But this isn't like a button to neglect. It's definitely worth pressing in situations where you feel like you need another defensive outside of Astral Shift or Stone Bulwark Totem. So the gameplay loop is actually very simple. Like I explained, Whispering Waves makes it so Healing Wave will cleave onto all the targets with Riptide. So the general rotation is throwing out as many Riptides as you can without like overcapping them, and then cleaving everybody with Healing Wave. Kind of prioritizing people with Riptide because of Deluge buffing our Healing Wave when we cast it on people with Riptide, or someone with Earth Shield like yourself, or usually I keep the other Earth Shield on the tank. One thing that I did want to talk about also are two iconic Shaman spells, are Healing Surge and Chain Heal. Neither of these abilities really will ever get pressed in Raid ever. The only time you would press Healing Surge is right after you press Healing Tide, when you're given your free Healing Surge charges. This even, honestly, I don't use all that often, just because you get so much more healing from your Healing Wave cleave that really the only situation that you would ever do this is after pressing Tide if someone is quite literally on the brink of death. Other than that, neither of those abilities will ever get pressed, and the only two real healing abilities you'll ever use are Riptide and Healing Wave. I feel like the biggest thing that most people struggle with, and that I honestly struggled with at the start, is kind of what to do during downtime. Farseer Resto Shaman is never going to run out of mana in any raid fight. Like, it just won't happen. If you run out of mana in raid, you're doing something seriously wrong. The rotation is essentially two buttons. It's Riptide and Healing Wave, and then pressing your cooldowns on top of that. So Earthen Wall Totem get used pretty much on CD, making sure you're using your Cloud Burst effectively, and then Ascendance, Healing Tide, and Link. But you'd be very, very hard-pressed to run out of mana. In fact, I don't think I've ever really gone below 50% mana on any fight ever. The biggest thing is to make sure that you're pressing Healing Wave as much as you can, even during downtime. So, obviously we're not capping our Riptides, but outside of that, you're pretty much spamming Healing Wave, even when nothing is happening. And I'll have a gameplay video in the background of Araz, and you can kind of see, like, when the circles come out that you need to dodge, there's really no damage coming out, but I'm still spamming as many Healing Waves as I can to stack Ancestors so that they're out whenever the damage does happen. One thing I did want to add is that Ancestral Swiftness will spawn an Ancestor automatically, which will then reduce our Riptide cooldown slightly. It also increases the recharge rate of our Riptide, meaning that we get it back every like 3-ish seconds. This is important to keep in mind because you're going to be getting Riptide charges back, so I always try and dump all of my charges of Riptide before I press Ancestral Swiftness and start pressing Healing Wave again. This makes sure that I won't overcap and I can get as many Riptides out on the team as possible so that my Healing Wave will then cleave more people. This is super important because you need to be stacking as many Ancestors as you can get, as well as using your Riptides and not capping them so that you can proc duply rooted elements, giving us Ascendance and a 25% haste buff. So this is really important during downtime so that when things start to happen, you already have maybe an Ascendance proc, or all your Riptides are out and you have multiple Ancestors ready to go. I really cannot stress enough how simple this build is. Outside of cooldown usage, like when you're using Ascendance or Link or Tide, which honestly should be assigned by your raid leader anyways. If they're not, I would just kind of throw them out depending on the damage profile for the fight. I tend to use Tide first, because it comes back sooner, followed by Ascendance, and then Link is kind of weird in this raid. There are some fights where it's really useful, and you kind of use it all the time, like, for example on Araz, I try and use it early so that I can get it back late. But there are some fights where Link is just honestly worthless, like, on Fractalus, there's really not a great time to use it. So I kind of just will throw it out at some point during the fight and hope that maybe someone with a debuff is standing in there and can get some DR from it or something. Or maybe when the circles come out, everyone needs to spread. I'll try and hit myself and maybe one other person with Link, just in case we're too close and cleave each other and nobody dies. But there really aren't that many great places to use Link in this raid. The biggest difference between playing this spec really well and playing it maybe not as well this season are reducing your downtime, so pressing Healing Wave as much as you can even when nothing's happening, just to spawn Ancestors, and Cloudburst usage. Cloudburst is really pretty useful in raid, especially with as much healing as we build through our Healing Wave cleaves. So making sure that you're pressing your Cloudburst early and then popping it during the damage is really useful. Admittedly, this is probably where I struggle the most, is Cloudburst usage. I always feel like I'm either gonna use it too early and not have enough healing, or I just wait too long and then pop it and overheal. So that seems to be, those are the two, I guess, biggest skill gap plays, for lack of a better word. And then outside of that, it's really just defensives. You have obviously Astral Shift, which is like really good. You get 40% DR every minute and a half, so you can press that twice, if not 3 or 4 times per fight, depending on the fight. Stone Bulwark Totem is really good. You'll get at least 1, if not 2, on pretty much every fight. And then not neglecting Earth Elemental, because the 15% max health and the 5% DR is really nothing to scoff at. It's super useful. And then really the final point I want to make is Spirit Walker's Grace. So Spirit Walker is on a 90-second cooldown, gives you 20% movement speed. It will also allow you to cast spells while moving for 15 seconds. This is super useful during a lot of high damage events in this raid that go out at the same time as movement. Notably, I think, as Fractalus, right? There's a lot of moving to break walls, set walls, spread for the scary spread circles, etc., where there's a lot of damage happening. This is a 90-second cooldown, so making sure to use this, you're going to get at least 2, if not 3 uses every fight. In some fights that are longer, you may even get more. This isn't even including Spatial from Evokers that will reduce the cooldown of it. So you honestly may even get more. I know on Fractalus, I tend to press it like 4 times in a 4.5 minute fight. So making sure to use this efficiently is like really key to getting a lot of good healing out on Resto Shaman, because our main weakness is trying to heal while moving, Whenever we can plant, we really can pump out big HPS, but whenever there's a lot of movement happening and a lot of chaos, it can get very difficult, so Spirit Walkers is like a super useful button to be pressing during any high movement phases. I do also want to add deeply rooted elements. So we never want to be capping our Riptide charges, but a lot of times we will proc deeply rooted elements, which gives us a couple seconds of ascendance from pressing Riptide. During these DRE windows, we really don't want to be pressing too many Riptides. We'd rather be cleaving with Healing Wave, because it just does more raw HPS. So unless you really have like no Riptides out for whatever reason, you, I don't know, fell asleep or were doing damage or whatever, you really should be pressing as many Healing Waves as you can during those windows. And really that's about it for Resto Shaman this season. It really is super simple. Cooldown usage is super important, Spirit Walker's usage is very important, defensive usage is always important for Shamans because of how squishy we are naturally. But the rotation is essentially just using Earthen Wall kind of on CD, making sure to get efficient use out of your Cloud Burst, spreading your Riptides, and then cleaving everyone with Healing Wave, making sure that you're pretty much pressing Healing Wave all the time when nothing's happening so that you're stacking Ancestors. It essentially is a 2-button rotation where you're not overcapping Riptides and you're pressing Healing Wave, but making sure you know when you should be spreading Riptides versus when you should just be cleaving everyone with Healing Wave can kind of make all the difference. I will say too that because of our lack of mobility when we're healing, it sometimes isn't a bad idea to maybe pull 2 or like maybe 3 Riptides for just a second if you know that there's a big movement phase happening. That way you have something to press while you're moving if you don't have any Spirit Walkers. I think that current Farseer Resto Shaman, at least in Raid, is pretty straightforward and really doesn't have that much nuance. I think the difference between a really good and maybe a more average Resto Shaman player right now is pretty big, but it really just comes down to a few very small changes that can be made in gameplay. Notably, dumping your charges before using Ancestral Swiftness, making sure that you're not refreshing Riptides on people and instead spreading them on more people, and just reducing downtime overall and filling with Healing Wave as much as you can for Ancestors. That about does it for my raid guide. I really hope that this video was helpful, and as always, happy raiding!